Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebells. I'm Jeremiah Waylon, and he's Roger Parks. And today, we're going to talk about complexes. Not the kind sociopaths have, but the kind you do with a kettlebell. All right? And well, I guess maybe we could venture into that realm, but it all depends how Roger's feeling, I guess.
We'll see how this goes.
Yeah. What we're going to give you is we're going to give you some guideposts to go by, two things you must consider, and a few other inputs we have based on things we've seen and based on things we've experienced. And just know we only upload one of these a week, so be sure to follow, like, subscribe, and all those things. And Roger, how you doing today?
I don't know. Okay, I guess.
All right, I like that.
We didn't. I wasn't prepared for that. We didn't go over that.
I know.
Before we
I like
recorded.
to spring that on you.
Okay.
I have already formed my opinion of how you are today, so
Okay.
I feel pretty good about things.
Well, then I'll ask you next time.
Okay. Fine. How am I doing today? I'm doing great, Roger. Thanks for asking.
That's
all
good.
right. So we got these out there. These are complexes. This is probably like one of the things that is most beloved about kettlebells, at least with the internet, because it's boring as shit to watch somebody just press a bunch. So we'll often find people stringing a bunch of skills together, like a swing, a clean, a press, a snatch, a squat, a thruster, a windmill, a bent press, a halo, and around the world. And you're going to do that 8 reps each and then set it down. Now, that might be a little bit much, but not too far off of what you see. The reason we did this episode is we want to clear the air on some of this and give you guys some actual things to consider so you can make smart kettlebell complexes. And we're going to get into the terminology here first. Decisions when it comes to your training. Roger, let's just get into it. Let's start with the terminology. Everybody's got their own thing.
Let's not.
Skip that. What do you want to start with?
Well, we're not going to skip it. What we're saying is we don't care about the terminology. That I've seen 50 videos on how people are stupid because they don't know the difference between a complex and a chain. I don't care. What we're talking about, complex, chains, supersets, anytime you're doing a bunch of work in a group with multiple exercises using a kettlebell, this is what we're talking about. So as far as the terminology goes, we don't really care what you call these things. We're talking about doing multiple exercises in one go. Now, one thing to get out of the way now is when we go through this, like a lot of these episodes, it's going to be a bit of a thought experiment. We've got to think, we've got to assume who you are and what you're doing. So we're going to assume that you have one kettlebell and that's all you're using. But the reality is many times you will have more. And I think a lot of very simple problems could be solved by simply having 2 or 3 bells and then putting one down and then grabbing another. That's how I do my own work. It doesn't make sense. I mean, even if I'm trying to train grip strength somehow, I can see not wanting to put the bell down, but I could also see picking up a heavier bell too. So don't limit yourself to one. Don't worry about the terminology because most of the time it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we're essentially getting out of way. And when you see this episode unfold, you're going to see why it's just more about 2 main things and training these particular things and finding a way to do that that's right for you. I just want, since we're not going to be so concerned with the terminology and sense, I want you to know that what you see on the internet could be a lie. All right. We've already covered this in a previous episode about why the internet is lying to you about kettlebells. But what we're talking about is these complexes. And this is something we've been wanting to do this episode for a while, but these people that put this elaborate complex up there and they're like, yeah, do this 8 times as quickly as possible. This is my workout for the day. And they're not even sweaty. And you're like, okay, you didn't do this. And I'll oftentimes do those and be like, wow, this is pretty challenging for me who's been doing kettlebells for quite a while and pretty darn good at them if I do pat myself on the back, which I will do because I have long arms. And, passing it off as like, this is a solid workout for anybody and everybody. There's all kinds of other things that are just unrealistic. So keep that in mind. And when we build these out, is there anything you want to add to that, Roger?
Not really. I mean, I guess the idea, if you as a listener are pulling a complex off of the internet and you're saying, hey, I'm going to do this, there are some tried and true complexes that are pretty solid. But just because so-and-so did it doesn't mean it's a good idea. And rather than just doing it, I would recommend that you watch this, think about it, and see if it makes sense for you, because often it doesn't. We were chatting before we started about one coach I saw who, you look back at his post, he was bragging about a particular PR press. And then a few weeks later, he's got one bell below in a complex. And I know he didn't get that strong in 2 weeks. And if this is one bell below your PR, you are not doing multiple reps with this bell with other exercises strung together for multiple rounds. You just aren't doing it. So
yeah, you might have done it for the video.
Yeah, you did it for the video. Did you do this complex once? Yes, we have evidence.
That's
but
the video
did you
proof.
do it exactly? Did you do it? Did you do one set every day for 12 days? Maybe you did. Probably not. You probably just did one, recorded it, and then told everybody, "Hey, this was my workout." So just as it's kind of a buyer beware. If you're pulling a complex off the internet, there is a solid chance that there was some shenanigans going on there. So don't just assume that they're good, because at least half of them are not.
All right. Well, now that we got that out of the way, those crummy assholes, let's talk about the two main things that we would consider, and we do consider when we're creating complexes or about to attempt them. Number one, it's what is your goal? So, Roger, what does that mean? Does that mean like my goal as far as training, or my goal for the complex, or a little bit of both? What is that?
Well, if you're doing a complex, if you have a goal or you don't. So if you have an overarching fitness goal and complexes fit into that, then that complex should have a particular goal. If you don't have a goal and you just want to do general exercise, this might be interesting to listen to make your complexes a little better, a little more challenging, or at least a little more appropriate. But it really doesn't matter what you do. Do some stuff, make it fun, get sweaty, get stronger. Probably doesn't really matter all that much. But we're assuming that you do have a goal, both for your overarching fitness and for the particular complex. So if you are thinking about, okay, what is this goal, and does this complex conform, you're going to have to reference that first question over and over and over again. If your goal is to build up strength endurance for your legs, and then you're doing one squat, one press, and then some push-ups next to the kettlebell, I'd say it's not going to be a great complex for you to achieve your objective. So you always want to go back to that first point.
Yeah, that's very good. So it's state your goal or be aware of it and stick to it. Pretty simple. Not too bad. Number two is understand what the limiting factor is. And assuming that you have one bell, what is going to be the limiting factor? More or less, do you know what the weak link is? And what do you mean by that, Roger?
It depends on the moves, the movements that you're linking together. It could be a particular upper body versus lower body. It could be one skill versus another. It could be grip strength. It could be muscle endurance. It could be cardiovascular endurance. Whatever it is, when you start stringing these things together, something's going to be underloaded, something's going to be overloaded. It's just the way it works with these things, unless you're setting the bells down and being really intelligent about it. But the reality is, if you're doing a mix between upper and lower body, your upper body should be stronger than your lower body. So you're going to have some mismatches, and you want to think about what those are. So when you're stringing together a bunch of moves, let's say you don't have a crazy amount of muscle endurance or even cardiovascular endurance, it may not be a bad idea to make your complexes a little more upper body heavy. So maybe you'll have, you're not gonna super overload them, because as you get heavier, that's going to increase the intensity, which is going to really tax your endurance. So maybe you'll start off by a simple mobility move, followed by an upper body move or two, and then you'll go into maybe one lower body move that's a little more challenging. But if you do too much lower body stuff, especially with higher load, then the intensity is going to get up there so quick that you are going to blow past the threshold at which you can perform as it relates to endurance. So it's easier to do upper body stuff in most cases than lower body stuff. It's easier to lift lighter weights than heavier weights. So you want to think about that limiting factor when you're putting these things together, because even though your objective may be to train your legs to create some muscular endurance, you're going to need to do that. But if you immediately just blast yourself with 5 or 6 different skills that are lower body dominant, then you're probably only going to get through one round. You're going to have a very negative experience, and you're not giving yourself a chance to really change. So anytime you're doing work like this, the thing that's really training you is the volume. It's not necessarily one particular stimulus. If it were, you'd be doing strength work and complexes would be a bad idea. So what you're looking for is to figure out what it is you're trying to do, let the volume train you, and don't overload the limiting factor to the point where you can't train other stuff too.
Yeah, that's good. Because when you can't move because your lungs are on fire and you can't hit that last press, then you're screwed if you put that in your complex. And what would be the point of that then? You're just going to you might as well just break away from that complex. Well said. All right, so those are two things. What is your goal? State it and stick to it, and then understand the limiting factor. Identify the weak link and make sure that you're building around that particular thing so you can execute everything you wanted to in that complex. Let's talk about a few guideposts. I think these are going to be pretty relevant to everybody. And there's some things in here you may not have thought about that will kind of take your combined kettlebell work to the next level. And the first one I got down here, Roger, when we talked was you can use more than one bell. And we did state that we're assuming you only have one bell, but we'll also relate this to people that might have more than one bell. For example, maybe you have a 24 kilo bell. You're like a strong man, and you have a 32 kilo bell, so you can be a little stronger. And by using more than one bell, what are some of the benefits, and how can you do that to make a complex?
Oh, the benefit is simple. It's that if you have a pattern, if you want to put two patterns together, if your daily work calls to do a particular set of skills and you're a bit stronger with one than you are with the other, use your heavier bell. It really is that simple. There's no need to just stick with one. Now, there is something we're going to talk about later that can balance things out if you do only have one bell. But you need to create an adequate, reasonable training stimulus. However you do that, whether you do it with volume, intensity, if you're doing more reps, you're doing more sets, you're doing more exercises, you need to create a stimulus that's relevant. So if I'm doing presses that are perfectly adequate to stimulate growth or strength in my upper body, but I don't have enough load for my lower body, then it makes sense for me to pick up a second bell if that's what I need to do. So it really is that simple. Just make sure that the load matches the goal, matches your ability.
So you're saying the kettlebell gods aren't going to come down and smite me because I was using one bell for a particular aspect, but I know I needed to use a heavier bell for this next aspect, and then I rest after said reps with all. I'm not going to be damned?
They might. I'm willing to risk it, though.
Okay. If he's willing to risk it, then I'm willing to risk it. You can tell he's a rebel. Now we got the next one in the guideposts is grouping like movements. So we talked about this idea of buckets, and what are some buckets that you would create or have people create? I like
to think about a few basic ones if I'm working complexes and really just designing programs in general with kettlebells. But there are some strength moves. There's some things where I'm going to be able to move a heavier bell. I'm going to be able to move close to my limit. And these moves may vary by person. These are my buckets. You have your buckets, I have mine. Maybe they're similar, maybe they're not. For me, for example, I can overhead press, I can rack squat, I can swing, and I can bench press. Bells that are all pretty similar. Bench press is a little bit heavier, so that one's a bit of a stretch. But if I'm doing things like, let's say, goblet squatting, or if I'm doing things like deadlifting, which I've said before, it doesn't usually end up in my kettlebell work, I'll be underloaded. So I have these buckets of these movements that I know are pretty similar for me. You can make an argument for putting all of these different difficult movements in a different complex, but you would have to have multiple size bells. So if this is one bell, you're probably going to want to use that same bell for all of these moves. So for me, for example, I can, if I'm looking to increase my overhead press and maybe I go a couple bells off, let's say I'm working to press a 48. Okay. Again, this is me. These are my particular bells, my particular skill set. I can take that bell and I can press it, I can rack squat it, and I can swing it. I will probably set it down and I will recognize that my endurance might be a limiting factor. I'll shake it off, and then I'll do it on the other side. If I were a high endurance lifter, which I am not, I might go right to the other side and do that because I have the strength. But again, I'm focusing on my goal, which is increasing my overhead press, and I have my eyes on my limiting factor. Why would that improve my overhead press? Well, because 40 is not my limit. It's a couple bells below, so I can work with it. And I want to continue to get full body stimulus because that's what overhead pressing requires. So if I'm starting with that press, I'm bringing it down into a solid rack squat. Similar, my stance is going to be different, but similar components, similar rules. I'm maintaining total body tension, and then I'm gonna end it with, again, total body tension of the swing, and that swing's also going to tax my grip a little bit. But I'm only doing one at a time. So for me, this is, this would be a chain. Okay. But for me, this is.
We didn't talk about terminology. So.
Sure. So
now I'm getting.
I know I'm sending mixed signals.
Yeah. You're sending way mixed signals.
But for me, this would be how I would design that. And that would be something that I could do to get in some work for some other body parts to chase my goal of improving my overhead press while keeping an eye on my limiting factor. And then I would do it on either side. And I would just set my volume. I would have probably either a predetermined volume or I would set an RPE. I would say, okay, and for those who don't know, it's rate of perceived exertion. It's usually a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 RPE is you're not doing anything. 10 is the most you could probably do. So for me, I'm going to say, you know what, this particular workout, I'm going to go until maybe it's an 8, 8.5, maybe a 9 for the last set. But once I start to get to 9, I'm done because I want to let the volume train me. And this would be the way I would put these things together. But either way, I'm putting the certain movements in that bucket where I'm categorizing things by load. Now, I might have another bucket where I'm working with some mobility moves. Okay. Oh, also I could throw a get up in there, but get ups are sometimes challenging to add into complexes because a get up it's a really long exercise. So if you're doing a get up, I could do a get up with those loads. But if I did a get up to an overhead press, to a squat, to a swing, and I know someone's going to try this, and then back down, yes, I could do it, but I would run out of steam very fast if I did it at a close to maximal load. So a get up, I actually would put more in the mobility category.
Yeah, because then it's going to infringe on a limiting factor at that point, because that endurance or being able to get that heavier bell overhead, if your goal is to increase the press. See how this goes together, folks? This is brilliant.
So I probably don't do a complex with a get up anyway, or what a lot of people like to do.
Yeah, because you're a get up hater.
They like to do presses in the different steps of the get up, which can be really challenging for your shoulders.
Yeah, that's a hard one. If that's
something you're trying to do, cool. But so I might have other moves where I'm doing stuff that is mobility, more like a halo, or some odd angles like a side swing, suitcase swing. Maybe I'm doing some ballistics in a 1.5 stance. I'd put those in kind of their own little bucket, and I would do them with their own thing.
Real quick question, Roger. Would this be cruel? And I may or may not have done this, but if somebody's like, this workout isn't really great, or I want to really feel it, maybe I warm them up with the lighter bell, but I make them press at every one of those get up spots, and then they're like, oh my God, this is on. Is that acceptable, or does that seem like just overkill?
No, I think everything's acceptable at a particular time. But again, we're going back to limiting factor. If you're doing this for someone who has weak shoulders, and then you're going into a shoulder workout, then you've already toasted them and you're a bad coach and you should get slapped.
Oh, I wouldn't do that.
Not in the good way that you like, but the bad way.
Oh, in the face?
So, it's not about good or bad, right or wrong. It's about, it's all going to be context dependent.
Right.
So I also have some ballistic classifications. Sometimes I will have stuff that is more speed work that I like to move together. Snatches, and for me, snatches and jerks pair really well together. I enjoy those.
Me too.
And I can do that with heavier load, with lighter load. It's all going to depend. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say, okay, I've got different buckets. This is how it works for me. I'm not going to put a really I'm not going to, let's say, put a windmill in with a really heavy complex. Maybe it's in someone's skill set. Personally, I think windmills are generally done with moderate to lighter weight because you can really explore ranges of motion, and it's a bit safer with lighter weight. But some people may be really proficient and they can throw it in there as either a filler or even a rest, to be honest. Sometimes you can do moves like that when you get really good at them. They feel good and it's a little bit of a break. So everyone's going to have their own buckets, but I have mine. And it is really important to group your movements up. So when you are creating a complex, don't start rummaging through all the different buckets, because you're quickly going to find that something's going to be way underloaded, something's going to be way overloaded. You're spending too much time, not enough time, whatever. Try and pair like things. But that brings us to the next thing that we were talking about.
Yeah, and that's the fluctuating reps, right? Mm-hmm. So this is essentially when you take that, if you're working that upper body and you don't have you have the load sufficient for your upper body, but you don't have the load sufficient for your lower body, you're going to add more reps to that. So say you're doing 2 presses, Roger, because you can handle 240 presses. Mm-hmm. But your legs, you can do 5 of those. So now you're doing 5. And sure. This is a way to change and make it more customizable to you and your needs, which I think you could take a complex from the internet, provided it matches your goal and you understand what the limiting factor is, and say like, well, I don't want to do 8 snatches after, 8 presses and 8 squats is going to be too much for me. Maybe I'm going to lower those snatches to 4 and still get this sort of same effect.
Exactly. So use your reps to modulate that second thing we talked about, which is your limiting factor. Because your limiting factor works both ways. It's not just the thing that's going to keep you from continuing. It's also the thing that you need to get close enough to train you. So if you're not getting close enough to something that could limit you, that means your stimulus is not sufficient. So if 2 presses is sufficient, but 2 squats is not sufficient, do more squats. It's not that complicated, but it is something that you do need to think about. And the reason we're doing this is we work with clients for a long time, and they feel compelled, because they're not sure what to do. They feel compelled to do the whole complex. And it blows my mind that I have been a coach for over 20 years. I've worked out since I was probably 5. I'm in good shape, but I don't have the same drive that my clients do. If you give them something, I got to do it. This is what it said. I got to do it. Like, huh? Yeah. I don't do that.
Don't have such a fixed mindset, bro.
I did half. This was a lot, man. So
and look, we cover this all the times when we're creating complexes for the app and everything like that. We're like, we'll do them and we'll be like, oh, that was too much. Let's think about this,
But this goes back to this idea that let the volume train you. That's one of the things, complexes are great at packing a lot of movement into a short space. But if you're doing 2-3 exercises all at once, then you can do more and more rounds of them. That volume is going to add up. So just be wary that, you do a complex the first time through. Oh, this is nothing. And then you do it the 5th time through, like, oh wait, this is starting to be something. And it's the accumulation of work. That's what's going to train you. That's what your body's going to walk away from. I have been stressed so much that I need to change so I don't have to suffer like this again. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get more endurance, whatever it happens to be.
All right. So that's a pretty simple one. And the next thing we have is time, which we thought would probably be everyone's most limiting factor. But how do we factor time into the complexes, Roger? And I'm not talking just like how much time you have to do them. That could be one thing, but...
what we're really talking about here is the amount of time that you can do one particular complex to get the desired benefit. So we have different energy systems that we've talked about on here before. So the first one is going to really last about 10 seconds. That's where with kettlebell people, we talk about alactic training. We're not getting to that point where we're hitting that lactic threshold. We're just moving for a short clip, maybe 10 seconds, and we're putting the belt down. Then we're going to get into, when we go longer, we're going 30 seconds a minute. We're starting to get into that muscle burning, right? That feeling of building muscular endurance. And if that's your goal, then odds are you want to spend some time there. You want to spend some time doing a complex that takes you 30 seconds or longer, because you're going to start to elicit those benefits. Again, you don't have to do it all in one set. You're going to do this across sets, across minutes, maybe 5, 10, 20, even 30 minutes. Okay. Then you're going to get into the endurance rep ranges, or the endurance time. And that's, going to be 2 minutes plus. So, maybe you're using a lighter bell to see if you can move, 3 minutes straight, right? Maybe that's something that you want to do to get your heart pumping. Is it going to be a true cardio? No, but it will help you. It will help you move your body longer. So you want to consider the time that each complex is going to take. So going back to the first example where I did 1 press, 1 squat, 1 swing, that makes a lot of sense because it doesn't take a lot of time to do. Okay, probably going to take me 8 seconds tops. Putting the bell down, I'm resting, I'm shaking it out. Nice long rest before I go on to my next one. If I want to, let's say, make my shoulders burn, right? And let's say I'm at the beginning of a preparation for, maybe I'm doing my half body weight press. Then I'm going to do more reps. I'm going to use a lighter bell, and I'm going to go, back and forth. I'm going to do a ton of presses. I'm going to do a ton of rack squats. I'm going to do even some carries. Can be really hard on keeping the bells tight, and the rack can be really hard on the shoulders. So I want that all that volume to accumulate. So you're thinking about the time that it's going to take you to do each complex. You don't want to completely max out those thresholds every time, because that means you're only going to be able to do it once or twice, and then you're going to be done. So you want to get close to these times, but don't bump right up against them. Let the volume train you.
Yes, that volume over the course of the entire session. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And finally, the 5th guidepost we have is exercise order. Essentially, you may want to consider putting the more challenging thing first. So let's say a snatch is an extremely challenging movement for you, and it requires a lot of coordination to do a snatch. But if you wear yourself out with the previous set, you did, whatever you did, like maybe you did 8 presses, 8 squats, and now you're like, oh, I got to do, 8 snatches, and snatches is a hard one for me. Now you're going to be hitting that limiting factor that we talked about again. And where if you would have just inverted those and done inverted or inverse, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Maybe it does to you, Roger, but not to me. But you flip that and you do those snatches first, and now you're able to press and squat, which typically you're going to probably not injure yourself or find yourself into too much trouble or deep water in that sort of order. So think about that when it comes to putting these complexes together. And it's something, if you program for other people, you definitely want to consider. And I know for a fact, when I look at some of these complexes on the internet, as somebody who makes a lot of complexes, and you can hop on the Bells app and you can check it out. We have lots of packs. We call them packs, but there's a lot of complexes work within some of that stuff. If it's challenging for me in a certain way, then I know it's going to be a real hard one for people at a certain level, right? So if your clients aren't there, be mindful of that. Anything you want to add to exercise order?
No, not at all. I think generally speaking, do the hard stuff first. That's true with programming in general.
And life.
If for whatever reason you're working at technical proficiency while fatigued, different animal. Then you may want to do the hard stuff last. But that goes back to the thing we talked about. Keep your goal in mind and don't lose sight of your limiting factor.
Yeah, I will say, like, I think we kind of put it there because beyond that, you really need more context. But if you just jump back when you're creating these complexes, or you're looking at a complex to do that you see on the internet, because for whatever reason that is all the rage, because like I said earlier, it's boring just to watch somebody press. Trust us, we have the view analytics to know our valuable press videos get jack shit. and we do this crazy complex and people are like, yeah, that's what I want. 7 seconds of that, big guy. But you want to just weigh those factors when you're going to decide, I'm going to do this complex, chain, superset, whatever you want to call it. We didn't even explore that for you, but you want to make sure you hit those 2 rules, and then maybe use these guideposts. And
they're the types of exercises that you can use really don't necessarily matter. It just needs to make sense. If you're looking to do more of like a kettlebell flow type thing, you're looking to do some odd angle strength. There's a time and a place to do overloaded odd angle strength, but it's probably not going to be in a complex. So think about what it is you're doing, and you don't need to have rules for it. And you can make an argument that, you want to shock the body every now and then, but there's sometimes a fine line between training and just absolute chaos. So think about doing these things intelligently. Think about putting like things together, and remember that the whole session is going to be what trains you. You don't need to do it all in one set. And if you find that you've got like, I want to do these 12 exercises or these 12 skills, cool, do 2 complexes. You don't need to do them all in one. Exactly. Maybe do one complex and another. Maybe save another one for another day.
Yeah. And I'm great you brought that up, because I did want to mention that, because when you think about your buckets, right, Roger, you do your strength complex, and then maybe you do your ballistic complex, and then you go back and forth and back and forth. And
sure,
that's great.
Sure. So, it's we don't want to come out here and say this is right and this is wrong, but there are times when, again, I'm watching someone do a max press, right, and a mediocre squat and a completely meaningless deadlift. And then they'll do push-ups next to the bell, because that's kettlebell training.
That's kettlebell training.
And then maybe they'll pick it up and they'll try and do something else. It's not that you can't do these things. It's that there are ways to make it a little more intelligent. So potentially you can do your press, you can do your squat, maybe you do a one-legged deadlift, because that's probably going to be a sufficient load. It's going to make sense. You got maybe you got a unilateral press pattern, you got a unilateral squat pattern, you got a unilateral hinge pattern. And then maybe you stack the push-ups, maybe you do 5, maybe you do 1 of each, then you do 5 push-ups. You shake it out, you do it again. Now you do have to be aware though, doing your push-ups after your presses is going to potentially create conflict with your overhead presses. So you're not going to want to use a heavy bell. If you do want to use a heavy bell, guess what?
Skip the push-ups. Wait, we said that at the same time.
We did.
Do you owe me a Coca-Cola or something?
I do not think I do, no.
All right.
So if you need the stimulus, then by all means find something. Maybe you feel like jump rope is a good, something else to do for a period of time. Maybe it's shadow boxing. Maybe it's more leg stuff. Maybe you're doing some jump squats or jump lunges, whatever. But you just have to keep in mind that as you add work, you are jeopardizing your ability to do more work somewhere else.
So essentially keep the main thing when you're doing these complexes, period. And do we have anything else we want to add?
No, I think that's good.
That's pretty good. And wait, I really do want to just get your take on this. Is the clean and jerk a complex?
I don't care.
Damn. I think it is. So if you do or you don't, put it in the comments.
If you think it is, I think it is.
Yes.
And feel free to put your favorite complexes in the comments.
Yeah.
There are some, there's some big ones that have been around for a while and they make a lot of sense. Another thing that we probably should have touched on a little bit.
Let's do it right quick.
Double bells.
All right.
A complex may make sense with single bells, but it does not make sense with double bells, because sometimes double bells mean more than twice the work, just in terms of a whole systemic load and fatigue.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah, don't assume that, I did it, I'm just going to get this done with double bells because I'm going to get both sides done at once. Like, okay, well, maybe, but your fatigue level will go up, and not discouraging you, because I love double bells. I would much rather pick up 2, get my work done in half the time or even less, and in my experience, get more results. But double bells do change some things for sure.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk about that in an upcoming video. But that being said, I like that idea, Roger. Comment your favorite complexes below, or if you think the clean and jerk is a complex, or if you think we're full of shite, as the Brits would say. And also download the Bells app. A lot of you watch or listen to this on the Apple Podcast app. And guess what? The Bells app is made for Apple. So download it. It's free. Do some of this stuff. These are well thought out complexes in there. Anything else, Roger?
Nope.
All right. Stay strong.